Welcome to the Daily Coffee Pro by Map It Forward, friends. Today on the podcast, we need to talk about protecting your staff. Recently, I had the great pleasure of having a conversation with a friend of mine who was telling me about how her staff had proactively worked to find a solution to a sexual harassment issue. And it was just a joy and a delight to hear how this team of her employees were able to come together and see a situation, come up with a solution and present it to their employer in a proactive way. And we are going to be having that team on the Map It Forward podcast to talk to you about this issue. It was related to sexual harassment, and I think it is genius what they did and the way that they've approached it for their whole team, and it needs to be shared with the world. So we will be having them on the podcast very, very soon. Today, I want to build off that conversation that I had with her, with my friend, and the email that I received from her team, and talk about making sure as employers that we are doing everything that's necessary to protect our employees. And that can be incredibly difficult because pretty much the whole industry, given the low barrier to entry, has received zero training in how to deal with these things before we open our businesses. And so it's left on us and the experience we may have had before we opened businesses to react and take action in the moment as is required to deal with some often very challenging situations. So given that recently was International Women's Day, and given that we tend to be in an industry where women are not believed, I know that it sucks to hear that, and I know that, a bunch of people out there may be like, well, that's not fairly. I'm telling you from experience, not just my own personal experience. I'm telling you from the many, many women who have conversations with me about conversations that they have had with their employers, that women are not believed in this industry. When they're bullied, when they're picked on, when they're sexually harassed, when they're raped, when they're violently abused, when they're verbally abused. So, and quite honestly, it's not just women. Men are not believed either. I have had conversations with men in this industry who have told me that they have been sexually harassed by people, and they go and they speak to their bosses about it, whether it be their first line manager or their employer, and they tell them and they're not believed. Or what's worse, they're told, I'm sure they didn't mean it, get over it, stop being so sensitive, come on, it's just guy talk, whatever. That's not protecting your staff. And we need to get better at protecting our staff. And I think that a lot of the reason we aren't protecting our staff is simply because we don't know what the appropriate response is. And so I want to have a chat to you today about a couple of things that may be helpful to give you some tools to be able to at least deal with the situation in the immediate moment. So if an employee comes to you and says, something's happened and it's serious and I need your help with it, an important first step is to create the space to hear what that employee has to say and to listen attentively. Not to listen on the fly while you're making coffees or whatever. It's important to create a space and make sure that that employee feels heard, because oftentimes it can be incredibly intimidating to admit that something has happened, whether it is sexual harassment or bullying or just feeling unsure whether you've misread a situation that could be interpreted one way or another. Coming to an employer and saying, I feel really uncomfortable and unsafe in a situation, but I don't know what to do about it, is intimidating for both parties. You as the leader, the very first thing that needs to happen is that you need to create a safe space for your employee to be heard. The second thing to do is make sure that in the moment that you're in with your employee, that they feel that this is a trusted and safe space for them. Coming to you shouldn't add to the threat of what they've experienced. And this is really important, because if someone has been sexually harassed and they come to you and your response after listening to them is something like, "But are you sure that that's what's happened? Are you convinced that that's what went down?" Stop over exaggerating. Any of these things suggest that you're not listening, and they're suggesting that you are taking a side, when what you really need to be doing is letting the person know, one, you're sorry that this has happened to them, and two, this is a safe space where they will be heard and that you will be present in. So check that the person is safe. Are they in any present danger? Do they need to see a doctor? Do they need any support? And that's the next one. What support do they immediately need after what's happened? Providing support is your priority as someone who cares about their employee, but also from a legal perspective, being able to provide the support that's necessary. If somebody has, God forbid, been raped, medical support is important. Finding out if that's what they have chosen and they need your help with. But having them tell you what they need as a form of support is really, really important. And the fourth thing is, and can often be the most difficult, I hear people say to me, "Lee, I don't know what to do in these situations. I don't know what action to take. I don't believe this person. I know that it could have gone both ways, etc., etc." And what I'm here to tell you is it's irrelevant. After something's happened, who to believe is almost, well, I think it's inconsequential. Trying to figure out who you should believe and who's right and who's wrong isn't what you should be focusing on right now. What you need to be finding out is, okay, so reiterate to the person who is coming to you telling them that something has happened. Reiterate to them, do I understand this correctly? That you have experienced this and experienced this and experienced this and experienced this. Reiterating it to them is an important way for you to make sure that you've understood them. Write it down, make sure you've understood it correctly, and then ask them. Not from a support perspective, ask them what action they would like you to take. And ask them that way. Okay, so this is what's happened to you. Am I hearing you correctly? Wait for them to confirm it. Ask them if they're safe. Ask them what support they need. And then ask them, what is the desired action that you would like me to take from here? Now, there may be a number of things that have to happen before you can take any kind of action. For example, speaking to the person who was involved, putting in place whatever legal measures need to be taken so that everybody's protected, having medical attention brought to the situation, if it's a supplier that is creating challenges, contacting the supplier and making sure that this is not tolerated and that you will no longer be doing business with them. All of these things are important things to make sure that you put in play as a part of the action that's to be taken. However, it's really important to understand that the person who has experienced the scenario that requires your protection as their leader, as the owner of the business that they work at, The direction of that action should at least be determined by them, even if you're the person who's taking the action. Because if somebody has been sexually harassed and they feel intimidated by the harasser, and they've decided that they do not want you to go and talk to that person about it, but they do need protection from that scenario, you going and talking to that person is breaking a sacred trust. You've just undone all the trust that they had in coming to you in the first place. This is just a couple of starting tools to help you along the way. But I was just so impressed by hearing this story that my friend told me about her staff, and I thought this is something that we need to talk more about on this podcast, and we will be inviting them to do it. And so this is just a couple of tools to get you started. Look out for the conversation coming soon. It will be with a couple of the ladies from the team from Baratza, who are led by the fabulous Kira Kennedy. I'm a big fan of Kira Kennedy's. Anyway, I hope you found this helpful. If you have any questions, you know where to get in contact with us. Peace, love, and peanut butter, friends. Have an amazing rest of your day.